Hello and welcome to NPC. That stands for Next Portable Console. It's a show about the games we take with us. I'm one of your three hosts, Brendon Bigley. I'm here with Federico Vitici.
Hello, Brendon. Hi.
Hello. Welcome back to the show. I'm also here with John Voorhees.
Hello. Good to see you, Brendon.
I need to start the episode by mentioning something, which is that I had a dream and you were in it, John.
Oh my God.
It's the weirdest dream, and I just need to talk to you guys about it in particular as
don't let anybody else hear this.
The people who run MacStories.net. I think you'd appreciate this. So the dream, long story short, the dream is you and I are on a road trip. Both of our phones are gone for some reason. We pop into a Verizon wireless store and we say, what is the cheapest plan we can get for a month that includes a free phone? And they're like, here it is. And they handed us both the iPhone 7.
Oh my God.
And I don't know why. It's just like I was sitting there, I was holding an iPhone 7. I was thinking to myself, wow, I kind of like this phone. And I turned to you, and in the dream, I said, isn't it wild that this has the A10 chip in it? I feel like the A10 chip just came out. I immediately wake up right after I say that, and my first thought is, there's no way that the iPhone 7 actually had the A10 in it, right? And I hop on Google, and it did.
Gosh.
If you asked me, like yesterday, in the pure light of day, could you, in a million years, remember which A chip the iPhone 7 had in it? Absolutely not. But is that not the best proof that like everything that happens to you in life is somehow like tucked away into your subconscious?
It's recorded in there somewhere, for sure.
Somewhere.
Unreal, super weird dream.
I'm impressed.
Can you tell me, Brendon, what chip was in the Ambernic RG Cube?
No, God, no.
Are you sure? Would you like to go to sleep and remember?
Ask me next week, and hopefully I'll dream about it right before we record again. That'd be really helpful. I'm going to say a ROCKNIX chip.
No, some kind of Dimensity.
I would have said ROCKNIX.
Didn't even get it. Anyway, welcome back to the show, everybody. We're going to talk about handhelds. I will shout out at the top in XL this week. We are talking about Linux on Android handhelds and our experiences with that. I've been testing it a lot, and I have a lot to say about it. So stay tuned.
Taking one for the team, that's for sure.
Yeah, I definitely did. But for now, if you can believe it, John has a controller to tell us about.
Oh, I do. And I didn't even find this. I think Tichi found this, but it's
a controller, so I feel like I have to throw it to you.
It is. It's the OnePlus Marksman game controller.
Marksman.
Okay.
Marksman.
And it was introduced alongside a new OnePlus phone called the Ace 6 Ultra. And this is a very unconventional controller that we're not really used to seeing for mobile phones because it doesn't have sticks or face buttons. It's got triggers and back paddles, and that's it. It looks as though it hinges, that you bend it in half in order to get your phone in, and it wraps around the outside more like a case than like a telescoping controller.
Isn't this exactly what I said last week when we were looking at that weird, or 2 weeks ago when we were looking at that weird OnePlus like concept art, maybe AI generated image, and I was like, it's strange to me they're not showing sticks on it.
Yeah,
here we are.
Here we are.
Just triggers.
Yeah, just triggers, and there's a couple of paddle buttons on the back. Yeah. It's designed obviously for first-person shooters, I think. I mean, they show in their promotional photos, they show someone using their thumbs to control the cameras on the front screen of the phone, and the triggers on the back, which pull at like 1,000 hertz, so that you've got really fast responses of, they say, 1.8 milliseconds, and it works with this Ace 6 Ultra phone, which has a MediaTek Dimensity 9500 with 165 hertz display and a 600 milliamp hour battery. And it charges at 120 watts, which is a lot. It's as a phone, it's obviously designed to be gaming centric. It's not like the highest end gaming phone that we've ever seen. On the other hand, it's got this kind of interesting controller case. I don't think this case is something that you would want to put in your pocket keep it on your phone all the time, because it does have some grips built into it. They're fairly subtle compared to a lot of controllers, but they are there, plus the triggers. I think it would get hung up in your pocket, but
You forgot to mention the most important part, John.
What's that?
Has a built-in attachment for an external cooler.
Oh, I forgot about that.
that
Yeah,
you can attach to the back of the controller.
it's one of those big disc ones that I think it looks like it screws on the back and probably uses a fan and maybe some other mechanics to cool off the back of the phone. But yes, that way you don't lose any frames as you're firing.
What a weird and interesting product. This is a China-only release for now.
Yeah.
It's coming out next week on April 28th in China. And I don't know, I continue to be fascinated by this market of accessories and devices that are primarily meant for mobile gaming in China. And here's OnePlus making a gaming phone and a controller for a gaming phone that it sort of defies all the traditional rules that we talk about controllers for phones.
Right.
It just embraces touch controls with just the triggers in the back and an attachment for cooling devices in the back.
Right. No shoulder buttons, no D-pad, nothing.
Very, very interesting.
It's
product.
fascinating. It's fascinating. I think yeah, it really speaks to the market over there, but it also I think speaks to like kind of another world where everything could be going hypothetically, you know.
And I'm gonna say something. This to me reminds me of the kind of controller for a phone that Apple would make. Like especially Johnny Ive Apple would totally make a controller that is not a controller with face buttons. It's just a case for a phone. Now, Apple wouldn't do the attachment for a cooling because Apple would say, no, our phones, vapor chamber or whatever.
Yeah.
But Apple would totally make a controller with no buttons.
With no buttons, yeah. We've removed the analog sticks.
And they wouldn't tell you about the, the 1,000 hertz polling rate. They tell you that was something like, they give it some fancy name. It'd be like hyper resolution trigger.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd see a graph with no labels on it.
I want to save the Valve news for later in the show because that's going to launch us into the topic for XL.
Yeah.
Instead, I want to talk about what's going on with the sort of Nintendo Switch 1 emulation scene.
Yeah.
So,
cool.
If you recall, the Nintendo Switch 1 has been a moddable console for years now. Now, obviously, one of the first exploits was discovered for the original Nintendo Switch very early in the Switch 1 life cycle. And over the years, there's been a couple of ways to mod a Nintendo Switch. There are software-based methods that involve an exploit in the NVIDIA Tegra system on a chip that the console has, as well as physical modifications that actually involve a physical mod chip that you can install, open up your Switch console, have some kind of professional install it for you. Now, unfortunately, obviously, modding a Nintendo Switch so far has meant, piracy, essentially. Like, that's how people have been able to play pirated copies of Nintendo Switch games on a Nintendo Switch console. But there's also the angle, there used to be the angle of people like me, for example, that wanted to dump their own physical Nintendo Switch games, as well as the save files for Nintendo Switch games. That's how I was able, a couple of years ago, to take my copy of Tears of the Kingdom and my save files for Tears of the Kingdom and finish the game on a PC emulator. At the time, it was Yuzu. Now, of course, there are others, but that was the idea. Now, what's happening here is that there's a couple of interesting things that have happened over the past couple of years in Nintendo Switch 1 emulation land. First off, if you want, you can install Android on a Nintendo Switch 1. And that's how people so far have been able to run emulators on a Switch 1, by loading an Android-based front end via the built-in operating system of the Nintendo Switch 1. You boot into Android and you install emulators on Android.
It's worth reiterating also that the Nintendo Switch 1 is built on the same architecture and chipset that the NVIDIA Shield tablet was way back when, because of the relationship between NVIDIA and Nintendo, which was just an Android tablet at the end of the day, running custom software made by Nintendo.
Yes. But something else is happening here, which is this emulator called Tico. That's Tico. And Tico has recently been in the news because they added to this emulator. It's an emulator for retro gaming, and so far you've been able to install things like GBA, Game Boy, Super Nintendo emulators on a Nintendo Switch. Tico runs on the modded Nintendo Switch firmware, so it's not booting you into Android first. It's running natively on a modded Nintendo Switch. But recently, Tico in version 0.7 added a Dolphin emulation core. So you're able to run GameCube and Nintendo Wii games on a modded Nintendo Switch 1. Now, go look for some gameplay videos. Obviously, it's very early, and it reminds
little
me
rough.
of the early PSP emulation days because I lived through those times. A lot of games don't run, but some games do. And so, for example, being able to see a GameCube game running natively on a Nintendo Switch via an emulator, and the emulator is not sort of being translated via Android first, but it's running natively on the Nintendo Switch operating system. I don't know, it's impressive, and it's kind of broken in many ways, but it works, and it can only get better from here. It's a shame that Nintendo Switch One, the Nintendo Switch One homebrew community gets a bad rap because of the piracy angle, right?
Yeah.
That's sort of what's prevented this homebrew community from being as interesting and fascinating and popular as it could be, because that's been the primary driver, right? Over the past few years, that sort of convinced people to mod a Nintendo Switch just to pirate games and download games off the internet. But there's other things happening, including Tico, and I don't know, it's interesting.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's the list of games that they have tested and confirmed that run is very short, but and it does they do say that sometimes you have to let the game crash and then restart it for it to work on the second go around.
Yeah.
But
is that like a shader compilation thing, do you think?
It is what that's at least that's what they
they
say it is. So
and
I don't know.
Speaking of emulations, something else that I wanted to mention, I think we touched upon a couple of months ago, on how some developers in the handheld community have been able to release more front ends and new software because of AI-assisted development, right? This is something that is also affecting the handheld community and especially the custom front-end community. There's a lot of new front ends and a lot of new homebrew projects because of the ease of these AI tools that just help you spitting out code and decompiling games and things like that.
Yeah.
But something that I saw that was fascinating a few days ago on Reddit, one of the most popular, long-standing emulators for the Super Nintendo on PSP, SNES 9X TYL.
Oh, right.
Something that I used to run 20 years ago.
Yeah,
it's the emulator that I used to finish, for the first time ever in my life, Super Metroid on a PSP. After something like 12 years, SNES 9X TYL got its first update in over a decade.
Wow.
And there's like a new fork from a new developer. And I saw some speculation on Reddit saying, this is what happens now with AI development, that people can just take these old projects and sort of update them again. And so obviously lots of mixed and conflicted feelings about this, right? Because on one hand, you have AI that is sort of becoming a problem for for game development. And you see these companies that sort of go out of their way to say, we didn't use AI in our video games. This is all, created by humans. And there's the whole conversation of layoffs because of AI and the rising costs of AI development.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it's hard to ignore how for the homebrew community, there can be some positives here. Including like taking some existing projects and issuing some updates for compatibility and to make sure that they continue to work. So it's one of those things where you can have two conflicting opinions and both can be true at the same time.
There's nuance to it. I feel I was watching this morning while I was making breakfast. I was watching the Retro Game Core video that Russ just put out about the new PS2 emulator fork. I don't know if you guys saw that. There's a new version of Nether SX2 that now includes turnip drivers specifically for the Snapdragon chips that support that. And I was thinking while I was watching that video, I was like, I wonder how much of this is due to the ability to, first of all, pull the code from Git, but also second of all, like, is there like an AI angle here? And, that could explain why some of the games are running worse, even with better drivers out of the box. But, as with all things, it'll just get better over time.
Yeah.
I think the thing about Tico, also that I was thinking about while you're talking about it is that same angle of like, if there is a single game that runs well out of the box as soon as they launch this thing, that really does feel like the Pandora's box opening for basically everything else to work eventually. You know, at that point
Right.
it becomes more about refinement than anything else.
Yeah, for sure. And this is the kind of thing that's happening across the open source community in general. It's not just handhelds. I mean,
Yes.
it's, people grabbing open source projects that have MIT licenses and just combining them, remixing them. It's the gaming community is part of that too.
Yeah, my not even a hot take, more like a warm take on this is that AI in the hands of like giant corporations kind of sucks, and especially when it leads to layoffs and scraping art from other people without attribution. But these AI tools in the hands of hobbyists with a passion, I think it's kind of neat. Because then, like, it opens the door for, like, it gives people more freedom to do whatever they want with their computers.
Right.
And so, like, the same tool in the hands of a corporation is terrible, but the same tool in the hand of a dedicated hobbyist developer who wants to, I don't know, enable an emulator to run on more devices or decompile some, old programs and bring them back to life, I think it's kind of awesome. So I really don't know what to think, but I think it's something that we will see more and more and more. Make of that what you will, but it's going to happen. What's next in our list? Oh, yes.
The Thor.
Oh, yes, the Thor. John, what's going on here? I feel the more we talk about what's happening here, the more I feel lucky that I have a console that will no longer be produced.
Yeah, no, you timed that well, and
Yeah.
I thank my lucky stars that I got my mini PC when I did. But Anne is raising the prices on the Thor Max and downgrading the storage. And this has like become a weekly topic now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But both the Thor and the Odin 3 lines have had their prices increased. There's a new SKU that's been added to the Thor to kind of try to soften the blow, which is a 16 gigabyte and 512 gigabyte SKU for 16 gigabytes of RAM and 512 of storage, which is $469. The prices are going up. They continue to go up. The original Thor had UFS 4.0 storage. The new ones that they're producing in the latest batches have UFS 3.1, which is roughly half the speed, which, according to the things I've read, shouldn't make much of a difference for most emulation, but it could make a difference at the high end of the spectrum if you're trying to emulate Switch and other,
PC.
Xbox and that
Yeah.
kind of thing, and PC and so forth. So that's not a great thing. I mean, obviously we've been talking a lot about Game Hub and Game Native and doing all kinds of other PC emulation on these devices. And you really need, the more speed you can have on across all the systems on these things, the better, because you're just throwing compute power and speed at the problem more than anything else. The software will continue to become more efficient, which will hopefully make them work better on devices like the existing Thor with slower storage. However, it is a bummer because right now this makes it more difficult to do things like the PC emulation. And I know the Ultra, I don't think the Ultra Thor is available at all anymore.
No.
Same goes with the top end model of the Odin 3 that Federico got a couple of months ago. So yeah, this continues to be an issue, and the prices continue to go up across the board. I mean, as often as we've talked about it, there are a lot more stories. It's happening to all these companies. Retroid has been struggling, I think, and discontinuing some things and also raising some prices. It's hitting all these companies.
Yeah. The thing I was thinking about the Thor Max news in particular is like that also the slower storage actually does kind of in some ways offset the reasons you would get the Thor Max in the first place. Like whenever
Exactly.
people ask me which version of the Thor they should get, usually I would ask them, do you want to be playing PC games or do you not want to be playing PC games? And if the answer is like, I don't really care about that much, I always say go for the Pro. I think it's the best bang for your buck. It'll have the higher end of emulation. You'll be able to play some PC stuff if you change your mind, but not that much. But if you are interested in using it as like a kind of PC emulation handheld, at all, then the Max is probably the way to go. And now I'm like, I think everyone should just get the Pro. I think if you're interested in the Thor at all, get the Pro while it exists, because eventually I feel like this is going to start to trickle down into the other lineups.
Does the Pro have Wi-Fi 7? I don't remember.
I don't know.
Let me look, because I mean that's the one other issue I think potentially is just the what kind of, if you want to do streaming, there's always that. But
Yeah, a couple of things that I want to sort of not predict, but like wonder out loud. If these companies will struggle to continue making high-end devices, I think that probably leaves them two options, especially if people are going to hold longer onto their handhelds because it doesn't really seem worth it, right, to upgrade to the latest model due to these constraints. I wonder if two things may happen. One, the most obvious one, probably, these companies will reconsider making devices at the low end, where it's easier to find components and they're cheaper and they don't cost a fortune and they can find more customers. But second, I also wonder if these companies will, or maybe some of them will pivot to software and will start selling some kind of service or subscription add-on. That's sort of what I'm wondering. Like, if you cannot make more money at the high end, and if people are not incentivized to buy new models, even if the models are available at all, how are you going to make money? Well, you can release new devices at the low end, which is sort of like Embernic is in a great spot right now because they can just get weird at the low end and they can just make whatever. I mean, this is literally the company that first made a square-shaped console. Now they're making one that flips with a square display. Like, Embernic doesn't care. But if you're Retroid, like, what does that leave you? It leaves you with devices at the low end. But then if you want to make more money, like, it leaves you with charging people for some kind of service, some kind of subscription. I wonder, like, are we gonna see like reskinned versions of GameHub or stuff like that, or Emulation Station, where the entire setup is taken away from you and there's some kind of management built in and you just sign up for like $3 a month and you get a nice front end? I don't know. I don't know. It seems kind of weird, especially when so many open source projects exist, and you gotta wonder. Like, I'm turning into my own devil's advocate here, basically. Especially when these devices are targeting the, stereotypical tinkerer like the three of us. Like, why would you sign up for a subscription when you can just get your hands dirty, go to GitHub, download the zip file, and install a custom open source front end on your handheld? So I don't know what's going to happen to these companies, but these component shortages and really high prices are not going away until next year. And so these companies also don't really have the buying power of a Valve or a Lenovo or Asus. And even those companies are struggling.
Yeah, I think the thing that makes it worse too right now is that unfortunately the prices have continued to go up. So this isn't the first time a lot of these companies have raised their prices, and I think it just makes the message even worse and dampens the market even more when it's not like, oh, we have this one-time thing, we're going to raise the prices $50. That sucks, but now it's like $50 here, $50 there, and it's like this slow drip where all of a sudden you find yourself where these things are significantly more expensive than they were 12 months ago. By the way, the Thor Pro does have Wi-Fi 7. It's the Lite that has Wi-Fi 6 or 6E, I think.
So we'll see. We'll continue to keep an eye on this, but it's not looking great.
It's not looking great, folks.
Yeah. So hold on to your existing device and treat it real nice because it's probably going to last you for a while.
Yeah.
Finally, and this is going to launch us into NPC XL, I wanted to talk about the first beta of Proton 11.
Yes.
So Proton, obviously, the translation layer that allows you to place PC games on your Steam Deck and on a Linux-based SteamOS. The first beta of Proton 11, in addition to a whole bunch of changes and compatibility fixes for a lot of games, introduces this new sort of combination. FEX, the emulator that translates those PC games to an ARM-based architecture, has been rolled into Proton. So Proton 11 beta and FX version, I don't remember what version is it? Like 2604 or something like that?
Something.
2404.
I forget.
One of the latest version of FX, they are now coexisting in the Proton 11 beta. And this is interesting because it allows for a far greater, potentially greater number of ARM-based devices to just ship Proton 11 and have the best of both worlds. You can have the latest and greatest Proton while also targeting emulation on ARM. And this has been interesting to follow over the past few days because, for example, the ROCKNIX firmware added initial support for Steam in Emulation Station. And I think this is exactly what Brendon is going to talk about in NPC XL.
Yeah.
But it seems like when I read the news, I thought, this is obvious. Like, if Valve is behind both of these efforts, both Proton and FX, and both are emulators with the goal of extending PC gaming from an x86 architecture to Linux or to ARM, duh. Of course they should
really
come together.
Clean. Yeah.
Of course it should come together in the same package.
Yeah.
Yep.
Extremely clean concept, I think. Just makes things a lot easier for most people also, I think, going forward, because ideally, I think you would want everybody to be using the most recent version of Proton, right? There is that kind of wiggle room where you can go into the properties of every single game individually and decide what version of Proton you want to use. That's why things like Proton DB exist, so you can go look up which versions of Proton run which games best. But I think going forward, the idea of it doesn't matter what device you have, the latest version of Proton is the one that will have everything you need to make that thing run, is a really great idea. And then also, of course, opening this door into now you can throw things like ROCKNIX on your Android handhelds is that gets us closer to the Steam Deck Mini idea that we've been talking about for
absolutely
basically as long as this show has existed. I'll talk more about my experience with ROCKNIX on an Android handheld later on XL, but I am very excited about this in a way that I never thought I would be excited about a beta release of Proton. You know what I mean? I think it's notable that this is the first time ever there are news stories being written about a Proton release.
Right. No, and I know you'll have more to say about it in XL, Brendon, but it is worth noting that it's very early days, and the articles all, they all say that, certain things like NVIDIA RTX games aren't working, and some DirectX 12 titles will crash, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think we're going to wrap up the regular episode here, and we're going to get a little bit nerdier with Proton and ROCKNIX in NPC XL, which you can just sign up for at $5 a month on Patreon, and we really appreciate if you do. We've been doing XL for the past, what is it, guys? For the past year?
At least, right?
More than that now, I think, because there are 20 episodes separating the two things. We started around episode 20.
So we've been doing it for a while, and we do it every week. And sometimes I'm not here. Sometimes Brendon goes to Paris or Japan. But you can count on it, essentially, almost every week.
You make him sound so fancy.
Well, Brendon, I think of the three of us, Brendon is the fancier one.
Well, that is true.
You know?
Do you like my Hawaiian shirt that's printed inside out? I feel like that's pretty fancy.
That's
really fancy. I should tell you, Brendon, John already knows. I guess I should tell our NPC listeners, I booked an appointment for a new tattoo. And you may be wondering, why do you mention it on NPC XL? So I was looking at... this sounds horrible when I say it, but I was looking at my body recently to find an empty spot.
Staring in front of the mirror.
I was just staring at myself, and I realized...
I end up like this?
I realized, well, this part is pretty empty, on my inner right arm. So I am gonna get an original Game Boy in cartoon style. And out of the display, there are three things sort of flying out of the display. A Triforce, a Mario Mushroom, and a Pokeball.
Nice.
Good trio. Good trio.
Yeah.
When is that happening?
Next month, in about a month from now.
Exciting.
Kinda. Yeah. So we'll see. But
you always do this at the beginning of the summer, then you have to cover up your arm.
It's not great timing.
Yeah, that's
Why
horrible
don't you just do this
Couldn't
should
you
do this
think
over
of
the
this
holidays.
like 3 months ago?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for someone who loves the beach as much as you do,
I know. Now I
nerfing
get
your
to-
own beach experience.
I already got all of this from my
Sylvia.
girlfriend. Now I need to get all of this from you guys.
Yeah, I think you
too.
need to get it from everyone, from your whole support network.
I
Everyone
know.
needs to chip in on this.
I know. I'll send you pictures. And I'll
Please
show it
do.
off on the
I'm
show,
excited.
of
I'm
course.
excited to see
Yes.
it.
All right. John, take us home. Where can people find us on the internet? and
They
all
can
of
find
that?
us all over the place. We've got Brendon Bigley over at wavelengths.online, Into the Aether, and YouTube. And of course, we are at MacStories.net, me and Federico, and Club Mac Stories, and a bunch of other podcasts. So check those out if you get a chance. And we're on social media. Just search for our names. You'll find us there. Until next week, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.
Keep gaming.
Okay.
Game on.
Okay. All right. Cool. We'll go with that.